Hello all, welcome back to 23 Minutes with Gyalpo and Dawa.
Hi.
And today we are going to, not going to discuss on a book, but rather we are doing something different, right?
Sure.
So what we are going to do today is we are going to interview our own Punrup Gyalpo for his debut collections of stories, Paris Butter Tea. So what we are going to do is we're not going to talk about the book itself, right?
Yeah.
So what we are going to do today is, so the interview is about how Gyalpo has become a writer, right? So it's all about his ideas of writing process and putting down his words and stories. So as always, welcome to 23 Minutes here, Gyalpo.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Gyalpo, so first, what would I would like to ask the question is, what inspired you to write such beautiful books?
Okay, so as a child, I was always a kid who wondered a lot, and if I have to put it in visuals, my head actually seems to be like an ocean of ideas.
Sure.
And it's something which is beyond me, and I can think about many things at the same time. So I mean, it was a kind of a unbridled energy which was tapped in me for a long period of time. But then I thought, these thoughts, whatever they may be, needs to be taken out in writing, right? And as I began to express myself in one or other form, I realized that I'm more settled, I would say, and my thoughts are calmer. That's something that I felt as a kid, and when I was doing engineering. I realized that I need to write. That was something which was there, and since then I've been preparing to write. That would mean 2 decades back I began to read a lot of stuff.
Sure.
And then now after so many years, this is the very first debut book. So I just published.
Yeah, so I already read the books. I've gone through all the stories. All of them are so amazing.
Thank
It
you.
talks about, the characters, and especially the most interesting is, like, as you said, it's a story from Ladakh, right? So it really displays the cultures, the tradition, the faith, and the beliefs and everything. So I would suggest everybody to, go through and read the book. It's such an amazing book, right? And my next question is to you is that, how was the experience of writing this book?
Whoa.
That's a huge question.
I gave almost 3 years exclusively for writing, and in that period I was just writing and reading, right? And to be frank, I was not prepared for the kind of world it will become, because 3 years back I decided that I am going to be a full-time writer. So which means, I restricted myself in my room for 2-3 years, and I really worked on building up the language and trying to understand what form of writing that I would do. For example, before that, I was not sure if I'm going to do, fiction or non-fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, I would say, fiction was not even in the radar of my writing, so repertoire, or what you would say, But then, slowly, I said, now is the time to make the plunge, right? And there's a process which actually led me to the fiction as a genre to write in, and so I was completely unaware how a writer works, and it's a world in itself. And I read stuff on a little bit on internet as to what is a daily routine of a writer, because in other jobs or in other professions, you have this restricted time of 9 to 5 or whatever you go, and there would be somebody sitting and he or she would ask you to do something and you have to go after it. But then as a writer, I've been it was all on me,
Exactly.
So it was completely freedom, whatever I do, whenever I do, and even if I do or don't do, doesn't matter.
Exactly.
So it was. I mean, I felt in that freedom more sense of responsibility than I ever before these 3 years, right? So I was not prepared for I would say the gamut of uncertainties that I went through. Beginning from the kind of schedule that I was having each day to the kind of emotional, I would say, turmoils that I was going through. For example, the biggest thing is, this the fear of uncertainty, this doubt on yourself. Whether
Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah. So it was complete blank. Page, and I was trying to create something out of it. So you would be surprised to know, before coming out with this couple of collections of the stories, I did 3 or 4 manuscripts, on other ideas, and then I kind of left them. So I wrote, I think for this book, in terms of number of words, I wrote like 4 more books. So I wrote around like 2 lakh words of my rubbish. So So it was a lot of topsy-turvy that I went through emotionally and psychologically, and also physically. I was restricting myself, and writers is a very it's a very lonely job, and you really cut your what shall I say, engagements with the society so that you can give that time to the book. Overall, I would rather say that whatever I had gone through until now in my life, and whatever I see as my education or learning, these 3 years were the best for me, and I learned I don't know, like a Godzilla or something. I was just drinking knowledge and
That's
skills
nice.
and all. Yeah,
and it's something that you are pleasure doing it, right? So that also matters a lot. So the next question I would ask is about because writing and reading itself is also such important skills, right? And writing obviously it's also another skill. So what is mostly what people face is issues is writing is such a daunting task, right? It takes time, so you have to think. So thinking is especially critical thinking is while writing is another task, right? So how was your how did you develop that writing habits? Because I think eventually if somebody starts writing, then only you can start writing a book, or it could be anything, right? Unless if you don't have that habit, I don't think that somebody could publish.
You're absolutely right. So for me, so I've been a lover of ideas. So I've been reading so many different kinds of books, and ranges from anything to anywhere. And I had this in terms of reading, I have this this nature of exploring things. For me, a book is to explore a world of the author. So so it was like that for me. And then I would say that many years of reading actually propelled me to write. So for me, 95% of the task for a writer is to read.
That's so true.
And what he writes is only 5% of his time. So when I read so many things actually, and it became very apparent, logical, conclusion that I should now, write. So that's how I transitioned from a reader to a writer. And of course, we need time to write. And I had decided that 3 years I'm trying to, learn how to write, and there are many nuances to write, and it depends what kind of thing you're writing. So if you're writing fiction, so there are so many tricks and skills that you have to pick up while you write. So that is what I've been doing for 3 years, and I would say that I had kept a daily kind of a target to write. So my target was, when I started initially, was just 250 words a day. Yeah. And then after writing that, I would go into reading. So when I began my 3 years of journey as a writer, my proportion of my time would go into reading, because it makes sense, because I was reading a lot of classical fiction, and then slowly as I got a hang of the writing and what hindrances that one could face, I increased my you would say target to 500, and then finally I could touch 1,000 per day.
That's quite a lot.
Yes, so something like that I targeted, and somehow I did. Yeah.
And then, if we go through this book, it's all about fictional characters, right? And the ideas are bounded to Ladakh. So what methods do you use to generate such ideas? And why do you only stick with fiction now? Why not nonfiction?
Okay, so first let me take you through the second question that you asked. Why fiction and why not nonfiction? So I mean, the readers and you would be really surprised, because I was a majorly nonfiction reader. So I mean, if you compare, so the percentage of fiction I would have read is lesser than nonfiction. But then because I was interested in so many domains, I'm big time into philosophy, and once you get the taste of philosophy, then you don't see any distinction between any field or any kind of knowledge. You would love to learn so many different subjects and fields. So for me to choose one was very difficult. So what is it that I want to do? For example, history or philosophy or engineering, or there's so many domains that I was exposed to throughout my education time. So then one time, there's a little anecdote. I know a guy, a monk from Switzerland.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's I think around 65. So he had come to Ladakh. Then I invited him to my home, and he said, okay, why don't we do a small trek? So I just joined him. I was into that exploratory time when what to do, what kind of stuff I want to write. And then based on our conversation and all, he suggested me a book, and he gave me a book basically by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's called The Brothers Komarazov. So it's a full novel on three brothers. One is a priest, and second is a police, and third is a thief or something. And it's about them. There I saw, this Fyodor Dostoevsky, the writer, was trying to resolve his philosophical and psychological problems through fiction.
That's nice.
Yeah. And then it opened up a full genre for me that, there is a fiction where philosophers and philosophies have been discussed, in the dark of fiction. And then I went through again this ecstatic time of exploring Sartre in Age of Reason, and Albert Camus, and then so many other folks like Leo Tolstoy as well. Yeah, so from there I saw the canvas for me is always big, and fiction is where I can accommodate myself. Yeah, therefore I chose fiction. So now for me it's like a big canvas, and I love it.
And like usually, like as many authors, like so, as you said, like that was the time when you were like exploring yourself, right, while writing. So, like, did you expect any surprise? Like, what are the most surprising element then while writing a book, right? And then, is there any challenges that you faced while writing Paris Tea?
Ah, I would say the biggest challenge is self-doubt. Because writing is very mystical, and it's highly intellectual and abstract. I give often this example. If you are an engineer and you're building a bridge,
Okay.
if you lay one kind of a steel rod, you would know it's there, and it was done today, and that's how it would look. When you will put the next rod, right? But when you write, you can't judge whether what you're writing would actually finally come out, see the light of the day. That's what it happens. So sometimes I would say you need really, a lot of courage and a bit of support from your family. And then, a little bit of madness to say that, whatever you're writing will come out and people will read.
Yeah.
So, self-doubt is the biggest obstacle that I'd say, one faces when somebody is trying to produce, a book or writing stuff for the first time. And, something like that. So, yeah.
And like because right now, like we are in Ladakh, right? So that the literature or like writing habits are still not exist, right?
True.
So what do you think, like in your view, like why are we not having much of a writers in the region?
I would say that's because there are not much of readers.
Exactly.
And the same thing. And there are not much of readers because there are not much of books in our homes.
Yeah, most of the time it's like a cupboard fills with like, I don't know, porcelain cups and all instead of a book, right?
Yes.
So
that's true. So my furthest memory of my home is basically my father's study. And when you see books stacked in the almirah, you tend to feel overwhelmed sometimes. That's my memory from my childhood. Also, you must be knowing this American author called Stephen King.
Yeah, the one who.
So he was asked, how he made his kids to read. I think this issue is across the culture, because we are competing with the books are competing with mobile, they are competing with PlayStations and video games. So he simply says that is because first I and my wife read. That's what Stephen King's statement. And second is because our home is full of books. So I think if you want to make your kid read, or you need to create that space where your kid would actually expose more often to the books than to other stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Ladakh needs to do in every home. If they feel that they need to create somebody who writes, they need to make them read, and for that a lot of books.
And how is it different from other Ladakhi stories or a book?
That's very, very, very difficult for me to say. But I would say throughout my reading days, I have found very less work of fiction based in Ladakh.
Yeah, that's true. Most of them is like either a historical research about a monastery. Yeah, I barely find any books on fiction in Ladakh. That's true.
So I would say that is the biggest distinction that I made. Second is that I try to have stories which are very realistic, and they are very unpredictable for the reader as well as the writer.
And that makes like turn your page. Like that's how like I completed like this book within, I don't know, 2-3 days.
Yeah,
Usually
I know.
it takes, times.
Yeah, so that's very conscious, because whatever little fable that we heard from our elders, we can predict the end, and there's a moral story at the end of the of the story. So I didn't want to do that. I don't want to. It's my belief that spoon feeding never works. So I keep, even in my personal life, with my friends, everybody, I just keep it open-ended. And I think that's a strength for my fiction. They're all open-ended, and there nothing closes. All the story, they have open ends to the interpretation of the reader.
Sure.
So yeah.
And like the next question is about like, what is the greatest takeaway that you have from this book?
Okay.
Yeah.
First thing is that I wanted to really fill the gap of not having fiction based in Ladakh, and on top of that, written by a Ladakhi.
Yeah.
So that satisfaction is for me, amazing. And now I know, our kids and our younger generation have at least a book where they can read about themselves. They can relate to the names which are there, because I'm using all the names of Ladakhi people in the book, and of course the places, the setup, people can relate. So so for me, Dawa, literature is like mirror. So for example, for our physicality, for our body, we need a mirror, to relate to it, and to be one with it. For me, literature is that mirror for our souls. So as an individual and as a society, I think now Ladakh has a small part of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. And we have like so aspiring writers in the region, right? And what message would you offer for them?
I would say first, read.
Yeah.
So without reading, there is no writer. And second, I would say, always have that curiosity in your mind, and you should actually glitter your eyes when you look at the world. And then the third one I would say is, be a little bit of mad. So mad, what it means is, there are many reasons not to do these things, and then at the same time there are very, very important reasons to write, especially in Ladakh and by a Ladakhi person. So
yeah, so I think that's all for today's episode.
Sure,
we had
you.
like enough of questions. And then if you're really interested in like what the book is about, then we have like shortly, like within 2-3 days, right, on 24th of August at 5 p.m. at Dental, we'll be having an author talks with Gyalpo on Betty's Tea. So you can ask questions. We have book signing events. So please make sure be there. And have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys. Bye.